So imagine for a second that you do absolutely everything right. You follow the traditional script to the letter, you graduate, you get a good job, and in your 20s, you just put your head down.
Right, you embrace the grind.
Exactly. You max out your 401k match every single year. You buy low-cost index funds. You live below your means. You climb the corporate ladder. And finally, you hit age 65. You pull the cord, you retire, and you look at your accounts. You are a multimillionaire.
Yep, the dream.
It is. You have the ultimate safety net, right? The perfect, pristine portfolio. By every traditional American metric, you are the absolute pinnacle of financial success.
I mean, that is the exact trajectory that every financial advisor, every personal finance blog, and frankly, our entire cultural narrative tells us to aim for. It represents security. It represents virtue. We're practically hardwired to crave that exact scenario because, well, historically, it feels safe.
Yeah, it feels incredibly safe. But I want to throw a massive wrench into that machinery today. Because what if I told you that achieving that universally applauded financial dream, dying with millions in the bank, isn't a success story at all?
Oh, wow.
What if it is actually a massive, catastrophic failure in how you optimized your life?
I'll tell you right now, that is a deeply uncomfortable premise.
Totally.
It completely upends decades of conventional wisdom.
Yeah.
If you walk into a room of ambitious professionals and tell them their savings rate is actually a measure of their failure to live, you are going to get a lot of defensive reactions.
Oh, people get so mad.
They really do. But when you strip away the emotion and look at this through the lens of pure mathematics, behavioral economics, and the actual utility of money, it's a question we absolutely have to confront.
And that is exactly our mission for this deep dive. We are exploring the core philosophy behind a deeply radical yet highly analytical framework developed by Bill Perkins. He's a former Wall Street energy trader. But, we aren't doing this to give you stock tips or talk about asset allocation.
Right, this isn't a portfolio breakdown.
No, not at all. We're going to look at life as an optimization problem. We're going to challenge the fundamental assumption that the goal is to make your money grow, and instead look at how to make your life grow, treating your life energy as the ultimate currency.
And that requires a complete rewiring of how you think about wealth. Because if you are listening to this, you're probably highly driven. You're building a career, maybe you're running a startup, investing in the market. You understand delayed gratification.
You're a saver.
Exactly. You are, by nature, a saver. You do the hard thing today so that tomorrow is easier. That's the classic American work ethic. But that ethic has a blind spot, and it's a blind spot that ends up costing people the absolute best years of their lives.
I think the best way to expose that blind spot is to revisit a story we've all been told since kindergarten. The fable of the ant and the grasshopper, Aesop's fable.
Oh, yeah. The classic.
We all know the setup, right? The ant is out there sweating in the summer sun, tirelessly gathering food, storing it up. Meanwhile, the grasshopper is playing the fiddle, chilling out, enjoying the sunshine. Then winter hits. The ant is warm in his anthill with plenty of food, and the grasshopper is freezing and starving.
Right.
The moral is pounded into our heads from day one. Don't be the grasshopper. Delay gratification. Work hard. Prepare for the winter of your life.
It is literally the foundational myth of the American saver. And look, it's not wrong in its assessment of the grasshopper. The grasshopper's fate is a tragedy of myopia. It's a total failure to plan. But the framework we are looking at today asks a question that completely shifts the paradigm. We know the grasshopper failed, but
when does the ant ever get to play?
yes, when does the ant get to actually enjoy the summer?
I love that question so much.
Right, because the ant survives the winter, sure. But if the ant spends its entire, very short lifespan slaving away in the dirt just to survive a period of cold weather, did it ever actually live?
Probably not.
Perkins uses this to introduce the idea that life optimization isn't just about avoiding the grasshopper's fate. It's about avoiding the ant's fate as well. The goal is to maximize your fulfillment while minimizing the waste of your most precious, non-renewable resource. And that resource isn't your money. It is your life energy.
I want to really dig into this concept of life energy because everything else we talk about today rests on it. It's a concept that actually traces back to another really influential movement from the 90s, the your money or your life philosophy.
Right, Vicki Robbins' work.
Exactly. We naturally view money as this abstract concept. It's a number on a Chase app or it's a physical piece of paper with a dead president on it. But that's a delusion. Money is actually a physical representation of the finite time you spent on Earth acquiring it.
Think about the mechanics of a paycheck. You are trading hours of your physical existence, hours you could have spent with your kids, or reading a book, or I don't know, just sleeping in exchange for currency. Therefore, money literally equals life energy.
Let's make this mathematically real for a second. Imagine you were working a job where, after taxes, you take home $20 an hour. You walk into a store and you see a gadget, or maybe you're ordering a fast casual lunch like Chipotle, and the total comes to $20. You aren't just swiping a plastic card.
No, you're not.
You are literally trading one unrecoverable hour of your life energy for that burrito.
It completely changes how you view consumption. When you realize that money is life energy, you stop seeing price tags in dollars and cents. You start seeing them in hours and days of your limited lifespan.
Right.
You look at a luxury car, a brand new Tesla, and you don't think, that cost $80,000. You think, does that car justify me giving up 2 entire years of my waking life sitting in an office?
And sometimes the answer is yes. If you are a massive gearhead and you love cars, maybe it is. But the calculation changes from financial accounting to existential accounting.
Exactly. And this existential accounting gets incredibly fascinating when we apply it to modern ambitious professionals. Let's look at the hidden costs of high-salary jobs.
Oh, this is my favorite part. Let's talk about that.
We have this ingrained belief that a higher salary inherently makes you wealthier. If you get a bump from, say, $40,000 a year to $70,000 a year, you are winning. But let's do the life energy math on that, because the surface numbers are incredibly deceiving.
This is where we have to calculate what you call the net hourly yield. On paper, the $70,000 earner is pulling in almost double. But what does that $70K job actually demand of your life energy? High-paying jobs rarely scale linearly in just hours worked. They scale in stress, in periphery costs, and in shadow work.
Shadow work, that is the perfect term for it. Let's look at that 70K earner. That job probably demands a nasty commute. So add 2 hours of unpaid travel time a day.
Right, sitting in gridlock.
Yep. It demands a specific professional wardrobe suits, dry cleaning, expensive shoes. It demands that you are always on. You are answering Slack messages at 9 p.m. on a Tuesday. You are spending your Sunday evening dreading Monday morning, which entirely drains your weekend energy.
And because you are so exhausted, you start paying for convenience. You buy the expensive pre-made meals, or you order DoorDash because you just don't have the energy to cook. You pay a premium for a gym right next to the office instead of the cheap one by your house. When you calculate the actual hours dedicated to sustaining that job, the commute, the decompression time, the emails at night, and then subtract the monetary costs of sustaining that lifestyle, your actual hourly rate just plummets.
It plummets hard. You might find that the 40K earner who, say, walks 10 minutes to a low-stress job, wears casual clothes, and totally disconnects at 5 p.m. actually has a higher net life yield per hour than the 70K earner. The higher earner is bleeding life energy for a gross number that doesn't translate into actual living.
It's insane. Which brings us to the core tension here. If you are earning this money, this life energy, what are you doing with it? The default answer for the ambitious professional is to save it, to hoard it for the future. And this is where Perkins shares a pivotal story from his own life that perfectly illustrates why that default instinct can be economically disastrous.
It's a great story.
I love this story because it is so relatable to anyone who has ever hustled in their 20s. So it's the early 1990s. Perkins is working his very first job on Wall Street, specifically on the floor of the New York Mercantile Exchange. He is a screen clerk.
Right, he describes himself as an assistant peon. It is the absolute bottom rung of the financial ladder.
Yeah, he's making $18,000 a year. Now, $18,000 a year in New York City, even in the 90s, is essentially poverty-level wages. He's living on the Upper West Side, but he's in an apartment he describes as the size of a pizza oven.
I can only imagine.
He is sharing a single studio with a roommate, divided by a makeshift wall. He is so incredibly broke that if he doesn't buy a monthly subway pass on the exact day he gets paid, he literally cannot afford the daily tokens to get to work for the rest of the month.
He talks about taking dates to the movies and just sweating bullets, praying they don't ask for popcorn, because he literally doesn't have the $3 in his checking account to cover it. It is peak financial struggle.
We've all been there. But because he has that ant mentality, he is insanely frugal. He actually takes a second job driving a limousine at night for his boss. And through sheer brutal discipline, he manages to scrounge together and save the $1,000. He is immensely proud of this. It's a triumph of the American saving ethos.
So he's chatting with his boss, a Wall Street partner named Joe Farrell. Perkins casually mentions that he's managed to save up this $1,000, probably expecting Farrell to praise his work ethic and prudence. Instead, Farrell looks at him and says, "Are you a finging idiot to save that money?"
It's such a jarring reaction.
It is, but Farrell's logic is an absolute masterclass in a concept that economists call consumption smoothing. Farrell basically tells him, look at where you are. You are on Wall Street. Your earning power is on an upward trajectory. Do you honestly think you are only going to make $18,000 a year for the rest of your life?
And boom, the light bulb goes off. Perkins realizes that by saving that $1,000, he was essentially taking money away from his starving, impoverished 20-something self, just to hand it over to his future, vastly wealthier 40-something self. Why would a poor person subsidize a rich person? It's a terrible economic trade.
When we talk about consumption smoothing, we are talking about the fact that human beings generally desire a relatively steady standard of living. But our incomes are not steady. Income is typically very low in our youth, it peaks in middle age, and it drops off again in retirement.
Right.
Rational economic theory suggests that to smooth out your lifestyle, you should actually borrow when you are young and poor, pay it back, and save aggressively when you are middle-aged and wealthy, and then spend down those savings when you are old.
But by hoarding that $1,000 when he was barely surviving, Perkins was doing the exact opposite of smoothing. He was making his absolute poorest years even poorer. He was artificially creating more hardship.
Right.
Now, I have to play devil's advocate here because if I'm listening to this in my 20s, my alarm bells are ringing. This goes against every single piece of financial advice I've ever heard. Isn't it incredibly reckless to just assume you're going to make more money later? I mean, not every kid in the mailroom becomes a CEO.
Sure.
Not every screen clerk becomes a millionaire energy trader. If I go out and blow my savings because I'm, consumption smoothing, and then my industry collapses or I get fired, I am completely exposed. I'm ruined.
That is the natural, completely understandable fear. It's the fear of the unknown. But the analytical framework addresses this by distinguishing between magnitude and direction. You do not need a crystal ball to predict the exact magnitude of your future earnings. Perkins didn't know he was going to make millions of dollars. But what you can reasonably predict, especially if you are an ambitious, educated professional in your 20s, is the direction of your earnings.
The trajectory.
Exactly. Even if Perkins had quit Wall Street entirely, even if he had gone to work as a manager at a restaurant, he likely would have made more than $18,000 a year. The overwhelming statistical probability for a young professional is that your income will go up. If you are on an upward trajectory, oversaving early on is fundamentally inefficient. You are hoarding a resource money when it is exceptionally scarce and highly valuable to your quality of life, only to save it for a decade when it will be abundant and its marginal impact on your life will be much smaller.
It makes me think of the cookie and treadmill mental math.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, like if you're trying to stay fit, you evaluate a cookie not just by how good it tastes, but by the hours on the treadmill required to burn it off. Is this cookie worth 45 minutes of sprinting? We have to apply that exact same rigor to our money and our time and our youth. Is this small amount of savings sitting in a bank account today worth the absolute deprivation of my current life? Especially given that I will likely be able to generate this exact same amount of money in a fraction of the time 10 years from now.
That is the perfect way to frame it. And that realization that hoarding cash for a distant, wealthier future is mathematically inefficient forces us into a very uncomfortable transition. If we shouldn't be saving every single penny, what exactly should we be doing with that life energy?
That's the million-dollar question.
The answer is that we have to start treating our life experiences with the exact same analytical rigor that a Wall Street firm applies to an investment portfolio.
Okay, this is where the philosophy introduces a concept that I think completely changes the game, the memory dividend. In traditional personal finance, we are trained to view experiences like taking a vacation, going to a concert, or taking a year off to backpack as sunk costs. You spend $3,000 on a trip to Europe, you have a week of fun, and then poof, the money is gone, the trip is over, and your net worth has decreased. It's viewed almost as an indulgence.
Right. But that view is a fundamental misunderstanding of human psychology, and it completely ignores how value accrues over a human lifetime. Experiences do not end when the physical event concludes. They pay out a continuous compounding yield over time. Every single time you recall that experience, every time you tell a story about it at a dinner party, every time you look at a photo and smile, you are receiving what is called a memory dividend.
Think about a guy in his 20s who decides to take a month and backpack through Southeast Asia. He sleeps in cheap hostels, he rides sketchy trains, he meets fascinating people. It costs him time and money and maybe delays his 401k contributions by a year.
Yep.
But talk to that same guy when he's 50. He will explicitly tell you he wouldn't trade those memories for any amount of money in the world. Why?
Yeah.
Because the original experience, the principal investment, has paid out so many dividends over the past 20 years that its total accrued value in his life is astronomically high.
And what is truly fascinating is how the memory dividend compounds, very similarly to how financial interest compounds. We all understand how an S&P 500 index fund works, right? You earn interest, and then you earn interest on your interest. Memories do the exact same thing.
Give me an example of that.
Let's say you go on a trip with a group of friends. A few years later, you all meet up for drinks, and you spend the evening laughing and reminiscing about that trip. That reminiscing is, in itself, a new positive experience. You are deepening your relationships, you are bonding, all built on the foundation of the original memory. The dividends are reinvested to create more dividends. 1 + 1 equals more than 2.
If anyone listening doubts the tangible, hard economic value of the memory dividend, you just have to look at Silicon Valley. Think about the most valuable companies in the world right now. Facebook, Google, Apple. They are explicitly monetizing the memory dividend, and they are generating billions of dollars in wealth doing it.
It is brilliant and perhaps slightly dystopian,
Yeah.
but it proves the underlying psychology perfectly.
You open your phone in the morning, and Apple Photos pushes an alert to your lock screen. On this day, 4 years ago. You click it, and it's a video of your kid learning to ride a bike, or a photo of you and your spouse on a beach in Mexico. What happens biologically? You smile. You get a dopamine hit. You feel a rush of warmth. You immediately turn to your spouse and show them. You might text the photo to a friend.
Apple and Facebook are artificially manufacturing a memory dividend right in front of your eyes. They do this to generate immense user loyalty, daily active engagement, and ultimately, corporate wealth. They understand better than we do that our memories have immense quantifiable value.
To highlight how often we ignore this, there's a story about a guy who was looking at buying real estate in Costa Rica. Let's call him Paulie. Paulie is evaluating this beachfront property purely through the lens of traditional finance. He is crunching the numbers on interest rates, tax implications, expected property appreciation over 15 years, and rental yields. He is hyper-focused on the financial return on equity, the ROE.
He is being the ultimate ant. He's doing what every real estate podcast tells you to do.
Precisely. But in his obsession with the financial return, he is completely ignoring the return on experience. He is forgetting the fundamental reason why he's investing in the first place. Think about it. We acquire money to eventually have experiences. That's the end goal. If you invest your money to get a financial return with the ultimate vague goal of eventually using that financial return to buy experiences down the line, you are taking a massively inefficient roundabout path.
Exactly. Why not just invest directly in the experiences now and start reaping the return on experience immediately? Why delay the payoff for 15 years?
This makes me think of how we approach our financial portfolios versus our life portfolios. As Americans, we are obsessed with financial compounding. We preach the gospel of starting early. We tell 22-year-olds to put money in a Roth IRA so it can compound for 40 years.
Oh,
But simultaneously, we leave our experience portfolios sitting entirely in cash under the mattress.
it's a great analogy. And worse, we let the inflation of physical aging eat away at our ability to even enjoy those experiences later. We delayed the trip to Europe until we are 65 when our knees hurt and we have less energy.
That analogy hits the nail on the head, and it highlights the absolute urgency of early investing in experiences. Just like compound interest in your 401k works best when you give it the longest possible timeline, the memory dividend requires a long tail to yield the highest returns. If you have an incredible life-altering experience at age 25, you get to collect memory dividends on that event for 60 years. You get 6 decades of storytelling, reminiscing, and identity building.
But if you wait,
Right, if you delay that exact same experience until you are 80, you might only collect dividends for 5 years. The total area under your lifetime fulfillment curve will be drastically, tragically smaller.
So, if we accept this premise, if experiences compound over time, and delaying them to hoard cash creates a massive waste of our life energy, we arrive at the most provocative central thesis of this entire philosophy. It's the literal mathematical goal of dying with a bank account of exactly 0. This is the moment we cross from interesting economic theory into radical life application. Because if money is simply your life energy converted into paper, and experiences are the ultimate payout of that energy, then dying with money left over is the ultimate waste.
It is a total system failure.
Exactly. It means you spent hours, weeks, maybe years of your finite life sitting in traffic, stressing over spreadsheets, away from your family, away from your passions, to earn a resource that you never converted back into actual living.
Let's walk through the math on this because it is devastating when you put numbers to it. Let's look at a hypothetical woman. We'll call her Elizabeth. Elizabeth is 45 years old. She lives in Austin, Texas, and she makes $60,000 a year at a standard office job.
She represents the median American professional. Solidly middle class, working hard, trying to do the right thing.
Right, so she makes $60,000 gross. After federal taxes, Social Security, and Medicare, she takes home about $48,900 a year. She works a standard 50-hour week when you factor in her commute and lunch break. If you divide her take-home pay by the hours she dedicates to her job, her actual life energy is worth $19.56 per hour.
Okay, I'm with you.
Now, let's say Elizabeth lives a long life, she saves responsibly, and eventually she passes away. And when she dies, her estate settles, and she leaves behind just $50,000 unspent in her bank account. Now, to most people, leaving 50 grand behind doesn't sound like a failure. It's not a massive multi-million-dollar hoard. It sounds like she was prudent. She kept a reasonable safety cushion right to the very end.
It sounds like the responsible way to manage risk.
But run the life energy equation on that $50,000. If she dies with $50,000 unspent and her life energy was worth 19.56 an hour, that means Elizabeth threw away over 2,500 hours of her life energy working for absolutely nothing.
2,500 hours. If you map that out, that is more than an entire year of 40-hour work weeks.
An entire year of her life. A year she could have spent traveling or learning a language or just sleeping in on Mondays. Instead, she spent it in a cubicle dealing with office politics for a pile of cash that ultimately outlived her. That is a tragedy.
It is a profound tragedy, and this isn't just a quirky philosophical idea. It is grounded in serious Nobel Prize-winning economic theory. We have to look at the work of Franco Modigliani. In the 1950s, Modigliani developed what is known as the life cycle hypothesis, or the LCH. He actually won the Nobel Prize in economics for this. Modigliani set out to model how rational people should handle their income and consumption over a lifetime.
And what did he find?
His mathematical conclusion was stark. If a rational person wants to maximize their utility, which is the economics term for fulfillment, enjoyment, and value, their wealth must decline to zero by the date of their death. Modigliani proved mathematically that if you die with a positive net worth, you fundamentally failed to get the maximum enjoyment out of the money you worked your entire life to earn. You left utility on the table.
But the theory assumes we have time. I think we have to address the extreme cases because they really snap this philosophy into sharp focus. Think about the story of Aaron and John. They were a couple, both successful, hard-working lawyers in their mid-30s. They had 3 young kids. They were doing everything right, building their nest egg. And then in 2008, when John was just 35 years old, he was diagnosed with an incredibly rare, aggressive form of cancer.
Clear cell sarcoma. They found a baseball-sized tumor. It is the absolute nightmare scenario that everyone secretly fears.
Instantly, the timeline of John's life shrank from decades to months. And observe what happens to their behavior when that stark deadline is introduced. The veil drops. Erin quits her high-paying job immediately. They stop contributing to their 401ks. They completely stop caring about their savings rate. Instead, they spend every possible second together. They go to the park with the kids, they play video games, they take walking tours around Boston in between his clinical trials. John tragically died just 3 months after his diagnosis. But Erin later said she was so incredibly grateful she quit her job to just be with him. The money meant absolutely nothing compared to the time.
What is fascinating from a behavioral standpoint is that the proximity of death wakes people up. When the end is suddenly visible, we snap out of our inertia, we stop operating on autopilot, and we ask, what am I actually doing with my time? Why was I waiting? But the core argument of the die with zero philosophy is that we shouldn't require a terminal diagnosis to wake up. Living as if your timeline is infinite isn't taking the long view. It is incredibly short-sighted because everyone's health declines. Every single person listening to this is going to die. The only difference between us and John is a slight variation in the timeline.
And this failure to optimize isn't just a middle-class problem. It actually scales up to the ultra-wealthy, and the math becomes even more absurd. Think about the concept of the honorary billionaire. Perkins uses this term because he says he spends like a billionaire aggressively trying to convert his wealth into experiences before he dies. But then you look at actual billionaires. Look at Warren Buffett or Michael Bloomberg or Bill Gates.
The statistics on high net worth hoarding are wild. The 2,000 richest households in America donate, on average, about 1% of their wealth each year. At that rate, Their wealth is compounding faster than they're giving it away. They literally cannot use up their resources before they die.
Even Bill Gates. Gates is arguably doing more good for the world than almost any human alive through his foundation. He has dedicated the latter half of his life to giving his money away to eradicate diseases. But he has a math problem. Since 2010, while aggressively trying to give his fortune away, his net worth has still practically doubled.
It's hard to outspend those kinds of returns. Right. But the point here is that life is not a game of Space Invaders. You don't get to the game over screen and get a high score based on all the unspent cash you racked up. You cannot take it to the grave. So why are the most intelligent, successful, highly rational people on the planet accumulating multiples of what they could ever possibly deploy in a lifetime?
The answer lies in two incredibly powerful psychological traps identified by behavioral economists:
Yeah.
myopia and inertia. Myopia is short-sightedness. It's the inability to delay gratification. That is the grasshopper's problem. But the ant suffers from inertia. Autopilot. Think about it. You spend 30 or 40 years training your brain to get a dopamine hit every time your savings account balance goes up. You associate that growing number with safety, with success, with virtue.
Totally. It becomes part of your identity.
Yeah.
By the time you hit 60 or 65, that habit is neurologically cemented. The economists Richard Saylor and Hersh Sheffrin noted this phenomena, saying, "It is hard to teach an old household new rules." Transitioning from a lifetime of saving to a phase of dissaving, intentionally shrinking your net worth, feels biologically unnatural and terrifying to someone who has spent 4 decades as a diligent ant.
Okay, I have to stop us right here, because I can hear the massive, glaring pushback that every single person listening is screaming at their phone right now.
Let's hear it.
This is brilliant in theory. Modigliani sounds like a genius. But to die with exactly $0, I need a piece of information that I do not possess: the exact date of my death. Since I don't know if I'm going to get hit by a bus at 50 or if I'm going to live to be a healthy 105, aiming for 0 feels like absolute reckless financial suicide. If I miscalculate, I'm eating cat food at age 90.
And that right there is the crux of the entire issue. That is the single biggest psychological and mathematical hurdle to this philosophy. In financial modeling, this is called longevity risk. It is the very real risk of outliving your money. But this is exactly where the conversation has to shift, because we do not have to guess. We don't have to live in fear. We have to look at how modern financial markets actually solve for unknown variables.
So let's get into the mechanics of managing longevity risk and what is known in economics as the annuity puzzle. Because if we are terrified of running out of money at age 85, we will never, ever give ourselves the permission to actually spend and enjoy our money at age 45. We have to definitively solve the fear in order to unlock the life.
To solve it, we first have to clearly define the two opposing risks that govern our lifespan. On one end of the spectrum, you have mortality risk. This is the risk of dying too early, like the tragic story of John. You die before you get to experience the life you meticulously saved for. You leave massive amounts of unspent life energy behind. On the other end of the spectrum, you have longevity risk. This is living much longer than your actuarial life expectancy, and consequently outliving your financial resources.
And how does the average financially prudent American handle longevity risk? They try to self-insure. They try to build a pile of cash big enough to cover every possible scenario. And the math shows how completely, wildly irrational this is.
It is.
If you are playing your own insurance agent and you don't know when you're going to die, you are forced to save for the absolute worst-case scenario.
Which means you have to save enough to fund your life up to the maximum biological limit of the human body.
Exactly. The oldest recorded human being lived to be 122 years and 164 days old.
Oh.
So if you are truly terrified of running out of money, and your strategy is self-insuring with a massive pile of index funds, you technically need to save a cushion big enough to fund your lifestyle until you are 123 years old.
That's a huge number.
Think about how astronomical that cash buffer has to be. And think about the ironclad guarantee that comes with it. If you save to live to 123, you are virtually guaranteed to waste massive amounts of your life energy working in a cubicle to build a cushion you will never, ever use. It is a mathematical certainty of waste.
It is incredibly inefficient capital allocation. Let's connect this to the broader purpose of financial markets. The entire point of an insurance market is to pool risk among a large group of people.
Right.
Think about your house. You don't self-insure your house against a fire by keeping $1 million in cash sitting in a safe in the basement just in case it burns down. That would be insane. That capital is trapped. Instead, you pay a small premium to an insurance company that pools the fire risk of thousands of homeowners. The financial product designed specifically to pool and transfer longevity risk is an annuity.
Let's explain the mechanics of this simply, because annuities have a weird reputation, and we need to be clear about what they actually do in this context.
In its most basic, pure form, an annuity is a contract between you and an insurance company. You give the insurance company a lump sum of money up front. In exchange for that lump sum, the company guarantees to pay you a set income stream, say $3,000 a month for the rest of your life, no matter how long you live.
Right, even if you live to 110.
Exactly. If you die a year later, the insurance company keeps the balance. But if you live to be 105, they have to keep paying you that $3,000 every single month, even if it costs them 10 times what you initially paid in. You have successfully transferred the risk of outliving your money from your own shoulders to a massive institution that can afford to pool that risk.
It creates an absolute floor. It covers your basic survival threshold, so you know you will never starve. But here is where human psychology gets in the way of perfect math. This brings up the annuity puzzle. Rational, utility-maximizing economists look at the math of annuities and they absolutely love them. An annuity perfectly solves the Modigliani life cycle hypothesis problem. It allows you to spin down your wealth without fear, but the general public, they hate them. They largely avoid them. Why?
It comes down to our biological hardwiring and loss aversion. The human brain is wired for survival, not for thriving. We're profoundly irrational when it comes to thinking about our own death. There's a great quote in a research from an analyst named Cooper Ritchie who states exactly that. The human brain is wired to be irrational about death.
We really are.
People despise the idea of handing over a $500,000 lump sum to an insurance company and then getting hit by a bus 2 years later. They feel like they got cheated. They feel like the insurance company won and their heirs lost that money.
Even though, mathematically, that product provided the exact psychological safety net they claimed they desperately needed in order to feel comfortable spending their money in the first place. It is totally irrational.
Complete.
We see this irrationality in end-of-life care, too. The data shows that people will willingly spend every last cent of their life savings on extreme medical interventions in the last few weeks of their life. Which makes sense. When you are near death, money has no other utility than trying to buy a few more breaths. But it is deeply, tragically irrational to sacrifice your best, healthiest, most vibrant years in your 40s and 50s, grinding at a job you hate just to oversave so you can eventually fund a few extra weeks on a ventilator in an ICU when you are 85.
Right. It is what economists call precautionary saving, taken to a pathological extreme. Now, the practical application here is not that you have to take your entire life savings and dump it into an annuity tomorrow, but to optimize your life, you must have a strategy to cover your basic survival threshold.
But what does that look like?
That might be a combination of Social Security, a corporate pension if you're lucky enough to have one, or purchasing a partial annuity. The point is, once you have insured that absolute floor, the rest of your money, your discretionary wealth, is unlocked. It can and should be aggressively spent down to maximize your life experiences.
I think of self-insuring like renting a luxury hotel room for an entire year, paying $500 a night, 365 days a year, just in case you decide to take a one-week vacation to that city sometime in the next 12 months. The cost of maintaining that unused buffer is astronomical.
I agree completely. The takeaway is that for every financial fear you have, fear of long-term care costs, fear of living to 100, fear of medical bankruptcy, there is a quantifiable insurance product that solves it. You are always mathematically better off paying the financial premium to an insurance company in dollars rather than paying the premium with your unrecoverable life energy by overworking.
Okay, so let's assume the listener is tracking with us. They are nodding along. They've accepted that hoarding is mathematically bad. They've bought an annuity to cover their longevity risk, so they aren't afraid of going broke at 90. They're finally ready to start spending their money to optimize their life and die with zero. Immediately, the ultimate defense mechanism kicks in. The moral trump card of American finance. What about the kids?
Ah, yes, the fortress of moral superiority.
Right, this whole die with zero thing is incredibly selfish. I'm not hoarding this money for me. I'm living frugally and hoarding these millions so I can leave a legacy for my children. I'm building generational wealth.
I hear that all the time.
We have to completely dismantle this traditional approach to legacy and inheritance. Because when you look at the actual math and the timing of it, it is devastatingly inefficient.
The framework calls out the hypocrisy of this defense beautifully. People claim that aiming to die with zero is a selfish act. But let's interrogate the logic of the traditional inheritance. If that money is truly for your kids, if the entire point of your sacrifice is to help them, why on earth are you waiting until you are dead to give it to them? By waiting until you die, you aren't being generous. You are leaving the outcome of their legacy entirely to chance.
The 3 Rs. This concept completely blew my mind because it exposes how lazy the traditional model is. The standard American inheritance is based on giving random amounts of money at a random time to random people.
Let's break that down because it's so true. First, random amounts. You have no idea how much money will actually be left in your estate when you die. It could be decimated by a decade of long-term care facility costs or a massive stock market crash right before you pass.
Yeah, you just don't know.
Second, a random time. You do not know when you are going to die. It could be tomorrow or it could be 30 years from now. And third, random people. You don't actually know which of your heirs will outlive you. Leaving your family's financial legacy to a roll of the dice is the exact opposite of intentional care.
And the data on when people actually receive inheritances in America is staggering. When you look at Federal Reserve data regarding the probability of inheritance receipt by age, the peak age for receiving an inheritance is roughly 60 years old.
Which is a tragic misalignment of the utility of money. We talked about utility earlier, the ability to extract actual value, enjoyment, or leverage from a dollar. The data strongly suggests that the ideal window for a child to receive a transfer of wealth is between the ages of 26 and 35.
Think about the massive difference in what money can achieve for a 30-year-old versus a 60-year-old. If you give a 30-year-old a lump sum of $50,000, it can literally alter the trajectory of their entire life. It is the down payment on a first home, allowing them to build equity instead of renting. It is the seed capital to start a small business. It is the ability to wipe out crippling student loan debt so they can afford to have a child.
That's life-changing money at that age.
But if you give that exact same $50,000 to a 60-year-old, what does it do? They're already nearing retirement. Their career path is set. Their kids are grown. Their house is probably paid off. Giving them money at 60 is like throwing a life preserver to someone who's already safely standing on the beach. It's too late to make a structural difference.
There's a heartbreaking story in the research about a billionaire who spent his entire life obsessively working and building wealth, justifying his absence by claiming he was doing it for the family. But in the process of building this empire, he completely ignored his son growing up. He missed the baseball games, the dinners, the formative years.
That's rough.
He eventually dies and leaves behind, oh, poor little rich boy, a son who inherits a massive world-changing fortune, but who has a deeply strained relationship with his father and absolutely zero fond childhood memories. The billions of dollars in the trust fund could not retroactively buy back the lost time.
Right.
Time with your kids is like water in the desert. If you have a massive reservoir of water, an extra gallon is worthless. But if you are dying of thirst, you would trade everything you own for a single drop. Time with your kids when they are young is the scarce, immensely valuable resource. Don't trade it for money you plan to give them 30 years too late.
And this exact same logic applies to philanthropy and charity. There's this famous story about a woman named Sylvia Bloom. She was a legal secretary in Brooklyn, New York. She lived to be 96 years old. To the outside world, she lived a very modest life. She rode the subway, she lived in a rent-controlled apartment, and she worked at the exact same law firm for 67 years.
I remember this story.
But secretly, she was paying attention to the investments her Wall Street bosses were making, and she mimicked them. Over decades, she amassed an $8.2 million fortune, and when she finally died at 96, she left almost all of it to charity. When the news broke, the media lauded her as this incredible, selfless, frugal hero.
It is a heartwarming human interest narrative, certainly, but if you view it through the lens of economic and philanthropic efficiency, her strategy was deeply flawed.
Exactly. Why was her massive donation actually a failure in optimization?
Because nonprofits and charities need capital now to solve compounding problems. Think about the issues charities tackle. Medical research, childhood poverty, climate change. These are problems that compound negatively over time.
Yeah, they get worse.
By hoarding that money and delaying her giving until she was 96, Sylvia Bloom robbed those charities of decades of potential impact. Think about what $1 million given in 1985 could have done. It could have funded a lab that developed a treatment that saved thousands of lives over the next 30 years. Instead, the money sat in a brokerage account. Furthermore, by waiting until she died to give it away, she completely deprived herself of the joy, fulfillment, and memory dividends of watching her own generosity actually change the world while she was alive to see it.
This challenges the entire mythology of the American Trust Fund. We are trained to think that leaving a massive inheritance in a will is the ultimate act of parental love and responsibility. But this framework argues that making your kids wait until you die to receive financial help is actually a form of financial and emotional neglect.
The actionable takeaway here is profound but mechanically simple. Separate your kids' money from your money right now. Decide exactly what you want to give them, put it in a separate bucket, and give it to them when it peaks in utility, when they are 30, not when they are 60. Once you have deliberately funded their legacy, the money that remains is your money, and that remainder must be optimized down to zero.
Okay, so the listener's fully on board. They've insured against living too long. They've carved out their kids' inheritance and given it to them at age 30. They finally have permission, without guilt, to spend their money on themselves. Now what? How do we actually allocate this spending to get the maximum return on experience? This requires us to look at what the framework calls the golden triangle, the constantly shifting relationship between our health, our wealth, and our time across our lifespan.
To understand the golden triangle, we first have to dismantle a very popular piece of basic financial advice, the 50-30-20 rule.
Yes, 50% of your income for needs, 30% for wants, and 20% for savings. Every personal finance influencer on YouTube preaches this as gospel.
And, to be fair, it is a great starting point for a 22-year-old with zero financial literacy. It builds discipline. But as a lifelong strategy for maximizing fulfillment, a static, unchanging savings rate is fundamentally flawed.
Why is that?
Because your physical ability to extract enjoyment from your money changes dramatically as your body ages and declines. The 50-30-20 rule assumes you should be saving the exact same percentage of your income at age 25 as you do at age 55. That makes absolutely no sense when you look at the three phases of life.
Let's break down those three phases, because I think this is where the reality check hits a lot of hard-charging professionals right in the teeth. Phase 1, youth. Let's say your 20s and early 30s. You have abundant physical health. You have abundant free time, because you likely don't have kids or a senior management role yet. But you have zero money.
Right. Phase 2, middle age. Your late 30s, your 40s, maybe early 50s. You still have relatively good health, and your wealth is steadily growing as your career peaks. But you face a severe, crushing time crunch. You are raising children, paying a mortgage, managing a team at work. Time becomes your absolute scarcest resource.
Phase 3, old age, 60s, 70s, and beyond. You finally have abundant time again because you retire. You have abundant money because your 401k has been compounding for 40 years.
Yeah.
But your health is in steep, irreversible decline. And that decline severely limits the utility of your money and time. You cannot go water skiing in your 90s, no matter how many millions of dollars are in your Charles Schwab account.
So to optimize across these phases, you have to engage in a practice called time bucketing. We all know what a bucket list is, a generic list of things you want to do someday before you die. Time bucketing forces you to get specific. You draw literal buckets for your decades, a bucket for your 30s, your 40s, your 50s, your 60s, and so on. And you place your desired life experiences into the appropriate decade bucket based primarily on the physical ability required to do them, intentionally ignoring the financial cost at first.
Right, because if your dream is to hike the Inca Trail to Machu Picchu or run a marathon, that absolutely has to go in the 30s or 40s bucket. If your dream is to take a leisurely luxury river cruise down the Danube, that can safely go in the 70s bucket. And this introduces a brilliant economic concept applied to biology, your personal interest rate.
This is an incredibly powerful mental model. In finance, we all respect compound interest. We know that money grows over time. But your personal interest rate relates to the depreciating nature of your physical health. As your body degrades, the cost of delaying an experience goes up.
Okay, unpack that a little bit.
The older you get, the more someone should have to pay you to delay an experience. If a magical genie offers to pay you to delay a backpacking trip to Europe from age 25 to age 30, the price you demand might be relatively low, say $5,000. But if that same genie asks you to delay that trip from age 75 to age 80, the price you demand should be astronomical, millions of dollars. Why? Because the risk of you being physically incapable of walking the cobblestone streets of Rome at 80 is massive. As your health depreciates, your personal interest rate on experiences skyrockets.
And this framework provides a clear solution to the misery of the Phase 2 time crunch, the middle-age squeeze. In middle age, you are cash-rich but time-poor. Therefore, you must aggressively trade your abundant resource, which is money, to buy back your scarce resource, which is time.
Yes.
The research backs this up heavily. Psychological studies prove that using money to buy time-saving services like Paying for laundry service, hiring a lawn care company, or getting your groceries delivered via Instacart directly and measurably increases life satisfaction regardless of your overall income level.
It is the ultimate act of life optimization. You are trading money, which you have a surplus of, to buy back time, which you desperately lack, so that you can actually enjoy the health you still possess.
But there is a very stubborn, puritanical resistance to this. I talk to high-earning professionals all the time who refuse to hire a house cleaner or a landscaper because they think it's frivolous or lazy. They say, I'll just work hard now, save the money, put it in an index fund, and I'll hike the Alps when I retire at 65.
Oh, I've heard that exact sentence.
Right. But shifting a high physical ability activity into your 60s isn't just a matter of having the financial means to do it. It might be a biological impossibility.
The book provides a brilliant visual for this. Imagine a graph with two overlapping curves. Your wealth curve starts low on the left and steadily goes up and to the right over time as you save and invest. Your health curve starts high on the left and steadily goes down over time as you age.
Okay, tracking.
At a certain point, usually in your late 50s or early 60s, those two lines cross. As you enter your old age, the gap between your high wealth and your low health represents your absolute inability to enjoy experiences, even though you can easily afford them. You have $3 million to ski the Swiss Alps, but your knees are bone on bone. That gap on the graph doesn't represent wealth. It represents wasted, unoptimized life energy.
Which brings us to the ultimate, most actionable, and frankly most terrifying phase of this entire philosophy: decumulation and finding your net worth peak. If our physical ability to extract enjoyment from our wealth declines as we age, then logically our net worth must peak well before traditional retirement age.
This is the hardest pill to swallow for the American saver. The net worth peak is the exact point in your life where your wealth is the highest it should ever be. It is the specific date where you transition from being an accumulator, where you celebrate your net worth growing, to becoming a decumulator, where you actively, intentionally, and aggressively start spending down your principal.
And when is that optimal timing? Because it sure isn't 65.
Yeah.
Based on the extensive data modeling done for the book incorporating average earnings growth, market interest rates, inflation, and standardized health decline curves, most people's optimal net worth peak occurs between the ages of 45 and 60.
I want everyone listening to let that sink in. Between the ages of 45 and 60, you should completely stop growing your net worth and start intentionally shrinking it.
Contrast that with traditional retirement planning. In the traditional Wall Street model, people work their fingers to the bone until 65. And even then, even after they retire, they are absolutely terrified to dip into their principal. They're advised to live solely off the 4% interest, actively hoping the principal balance continues to grow until the day they die.
Which is a mathematical guarantee that they will die, leaving a massive pile of unspent life energy on the table. The traditional model traps people by telling them to aim for a target number. Let's say your financial advisor runs a Monte Carlo simulation and tells you that you need exactly $2.5 million to retire safely. You grind away and you hit $2.5 million at age 55. What happens psychologically?
The goalposts move. I see this all the time. You hit 2.5 million, and suddenly you think, well, inflation is pretty high right now. 3 million would buy a much better safety margin. Let's just do one more year. You get caught in the just one more year syndrome.
And what is the hidden, uncalculated cost of just one more year? Working those extra years to build a slightly bigger financial safety net means you are directly sacrificing equivalent years of your remaining free time and your rapidly depreciating health.
It's a terrible trade.
It really is. You are permanently closing the window on certain high physical ability life experiences that you can never, ever get back. The marginal dollars gained in that extra year of work do not equal the experience points lost.
But wait, here is the ultimate defense I hear from high performers, entrepreneurs, and executives. But I love my job. I am a founder. I love building my company. I'm not sacrificing my life. I enjoy the work.
And the optimization model's response to that is ruthlessly logical. The math doesn't care where the money comes from or how much you enjoyed making it.
Oh, that's brutal.
It is, but it's true. Even if you absolutely love your job and would gladly do it for free, the fact remains that you are being paid. You are accumulating wealth. And if you are accumulating wealth, you have a mathematical obligation to spend it on experiences to maximize your life's utility.
There is a great example of this featuring the behavioral economist Mir Statman. Statman realized, based on his own theories, that he needed to start decumulating and spending his money. But he had a problem. He didn't care about the traditional luxury traps. He didn't care about fine dining. Spending $500 on a Michelin star meal just made him feel stupid.
I get that.
So he optimized for what he did care about. He loved traveling, but he hated the physical toll of flying. So he decided he would fly first class or business class everywhere he went for the rest of his life. If you love your job and you want to keep working and earning into your 60s, that is fine. But you have an obligation to yourself to find new, high-cost passions to burn that capital on. Upgrade your travel, fund a massive immediate philanthropic project, take your entire extended family on a $100,000 luxury vacation every summer.
Exactly. So how do you practically manage this phase of decumulation? You have to start tracking your biological age versus your chronological age. Once you hit that survival threshold, once your annuity or pension guarantees you won't starve, you must fundamentally aggressively shift your mindset. You must stop viewing the growth of your net worth as a success. Instead, you must view any growth in your net worth after your peak as a direct failure to convert your money into life experiences.
I have to admit, that is terrifying for the average American who have been trained for decades to hoard. Hitting your peak net worth at age 50 and intentionally shrinking it down feels wrong. Feels like you are piloting a plane at 30,000 feet and you intentionally pushed the nose down into a steep dive. Every biological and cultural instinct screams at you to pull up.
It feels like a nosedive because you are looking at the wrong instrument panel. You have to reframe the visual. It isn't a nosedive, it is a precision landing.
I love that.
Imagine you are a master pilot. You have calculated exactly how much fuel is needed to cross the ocean and reach your destination. You aren't crashing. You are perfectly intentionally expending your fuel so that you glide down to the runway, you slide into the gate, the engine's cut out, and you have exactly 0 drops of fuel left in the tank. You flew the maximum possible distance, you saw the maximum amount of the world, and you didn't waste a single drop of fuel.
Wow. A precision landing. That is the perfect way to visualize it. You don't want to land the plane with half a tank of gas you paid for but never used. Okay. We have covered an incredible amount of ground today and challenged some very deeply held beliefs. Let's briefly recap the massive paradigm shifts we've unpacked from Bill Perkins' framework.
First, money is not just abstract currency. It is a physical representation of your finite life energy. Second, experiences are not sunk costs. They act like investments that pay compounding memory dividends for decades. Third, if you want to leave a legacy to your kids, give it to them at age 30 when it peaks in utility, not at age 60 when you die.
Fourth, you must use your abundant resources to buy back your scarce resources. In middle age, trade your money to buy back your time. And finally, you must calculate your net worth peak likely between ages 45 and 60 and begin the precision landing of decumulation.
Now, we do have to acknowledge the author's own concession here, which he calls the impossible ideal. Dying with exactly $0 and 0 cents on the precise day you take your last breath is mathematically impossible unless you possess a crystal ball. In reality, you will likely die with a few bucks in your pocket or maybe even a few $100,000 in home equity.
But it's like millions of people who aim for spiritual perfection, trying to be perfectly kind or perfectly wise. You inevitably fall short, but the aiming is what matters. Aiming for 0 fundamentally shifts your entire trajectory. It forces you to stop blindly, anxiously surviving the winter like the ant and start aggressively thriving in the summer.
It is the shift from autopilot hoarding to deliberate intentional living.
So I want to leave you, the listener, with a final provocative challenge to mull over today. Sometime after this deep dive ends, I want you to open up your banking app or look at your Vanguard dashboard. Look at that total balance. We have been trained our entire lives to look at that number and feel a sense of safety, a sense of pride, a pat on the back. But after today, I want you to look at that balance and realize that it doesn't just represent safety. That number represents unlived experiences. It represents hours, weeks, and years of your life energy sitting locked in a digital vault.
It really does.
So ask yourself, what is one experience, a trip, a passion project, a gift to your family that you are delaying right now, that you mathematically, biologically cannot afford to delay any longer?
That is the ultimate question we all have to answer.
Keep questioning the consensus. Stop living on autopilot. And start optimizing your life energy. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.